Christmas Eve came hard to Red Valley, and the wind cut like a file. Lantern lights shivered on the boardwalks, and dust mixed with snow in the street. Folks weren't singing carols, they were gathering outside the sheriff's door. A young woman stood in irons, her dress in rags, her eyes daring the whole town. 3 men nursed fresh bites and swore she was a canyon devil. The sheriff cleared his throat and said the territory wouldn't pay to keep her. He called it responsibility, but the crowd called it an auction. A fat rancher grinned and lifted his bid like he owned the sky. She spat at his boots and promised she'd never be broken. That's when Clint Rollins' mountain bred and ranch maid stepped out of the shadows. If you've got a soft spot for hard stories, subscribe now and ride with us. You keeping your joints warm this winter, Clint hadn't come for trouble. He'd come for salt, wire, and a new coffee tin. He was 36, quiet as pine woods, and folks said his word weighed more than lead. He watched the girl's wrists raw under the shackles, and he watched the men watching her. That rancher was Lyle Hargrove, and his smile looked like a gate left open on purpose. Hargrove bid 50 and laughed, saying he'd teach her manners by spring. The sheriff started the chant again, and the crowd answered like coyotes. 60, 70, 80. The numbers climbed, and the girl's fury turned to a tight kind of stillness. Clint saw it, then not weakness, but the moment a fighter runs out of room. He stepped forward, slow hands loose at his sides, and laid one word on the air. 100. Even the wind seemed to hush, and Hargrove's grin slid off his face. "You've lost your senses, Rollins," Hargrove said, and his hand twitched near his belt. Clint didn't reach for a gun, he just met the man's eyes and didn't blink. The sheriff swallowed hard and called it once, called it twice, then cracked the sail with a gavel. The deputies unlocked the irons and shoved her toward Clint like she was baggage. She didn't move. She stood there, breathing smoke and pride, ready to bolt or bite. Clint tipped his hat, kept his distance, and asked, "What's your name?" Her voice came out rough, and she said, "Riley," like it was a dare. Clint nodded once and walked her past the staring men because he'd found his gold. They rode out with the sun already gone, and the cold riding up from the ground. Red Valley's lights fell behind the hills, and the world turned wide and quiet. Riley sat stiff on the spare bay, one hand near her thigh, out of habit, eyes cutting left and right. Clint kept his pace easy, like he wasn't in a hurry to own a single moment. "You planning to run?" he asked, not accusing, just measuring the weather in her. Maybe she said, and her chin lifted. "You can ride," he answered, and it wasn't a compliment, it was respect. He led them to a creek lined with cottonwoods, where ice clung to the shadows. Clint swung down first, tied both horses loose, and turned his back while he worked. He built a small fire, set out 2 bedrolls, and warmed a tin of beans on a flat stone. Riley stayed mounted, watching for the trap, waiting for the grab that always came. "This where you tie me up," she said. "No," Clint said. "You expect me to believe that I don't expect anything." He poured coffee into a dented cup and set it on a stump between them. "Water's clean," he said, and he didn't step closer. Riley slid down, slow boots crunching on frost, and kept 3 full paces of space. When she knelt by the creek, the firelight caught her wrists red and split where iron had rubbed. Clint looked away on purpose because pity can feel like a rope. They ate in silence, and Riley ate like someone counting days. When she finally wiped her mouth, she asked, "Why'd you pay that money?" Clint stared into the flames a long beat. "Because you deserved better than what was coming. You don't know me." "Maybe not," he said, "but I know men like Hargrove." Night settled thick, and the wind kept worrying the trees. "Pick a bedroll," Clint said. "You ain't going to touch me, no. You swear I don't give my word lightly." She lay down, facing away, still tense, still listening. "If I leave in the morning, you going to hunt me down? No. Why not? Ain't my job to cage you." "You're strange," she muttered. "So I've been told." Clint stayed by the coals, keeping watch, and Riley slept. Morning came sharp and pale, the kind of winter light that doesn't promise comfort. Clint was already up, cinching saddles and checking cinch straps like habit was prayer. Riley sat by the creek with her knees drawn up, staring at the open land like it might vanish. She could have run, and both of them knew it. When she finally stood, her voice held more confusion than anger. "I didn't leave," she said. I noticed, Clint replied, and he didn't make it a victory. Don't read into it. I won't. They rode west until the grass gave way to fenced pasture and a low line of buildings. The Rollins place wasn't fancy, but it was solid, and that mattered more. A wide barn, a corral full of horses' smoke from a cook stove, and a house that looked like it kept its promises. Riley slowed her mare eyes, scanning for cages, chains, and men with easy cruelty. "This your place?" she asked. "It is," Clint said. 2 hands stepped out of the barn as they came in. Tom was older, shoulders set like a gatepost, eyes sharp from too many winters. Jesse was younger, lean, and curious, the kind that still believed good days were common. Tom's gaze landed on Riley, then on Clint, and his mouth tightened. "Boss, what's this?" he started. "She's staying," Clint said, plain as fence wire. Tom looked ready to argue, but he'd learned the sound of Clint's final word. Jesse just nodded once like he was filing it away for later. Riley stayed mounted a moment longer because stepping down felt like surrender. Clint didn't demand anything from her, he just opened a stall gate and let her choose where to stand. "You hungry?" he asked. She didn't answer, but her eyes did. Inside, the kitchen smelled like coffee, warm bread, and clean wood, and it almost made her angry. Clint set a plate in front of her without ceremony. "Eat," he said. She ate fast, then slowed, when she realized nobody was watching for her to choke. Clint sat across from her hands, folded calm as a man waiting out a storm. "You're safe here," he said. "If you want to leave, I won't stop you." Her eyes flashed up hard. "Why you keep saying that? Because you ain't a prisoner." Riley stared at her, wrapped wrists, then at the table like it might bite. "I don't know how to be tame," she said, and it came out like a warning. Clint shook his head once. "Good," he said. "I don't want tame." She looked up sharp, caught off guard. "I want honest," Clint added, and strong. For a second, her fierce mask cracked just enough to show something bruised beneath. She pushed back from the table, went to the doorway, and stared at the open land. "People save you, then try to own you," she said quietly. Clint didn't flinch. "Not here. Not with me." She turned back, shoulders squared like she was walking into fire. "I'll work," she said. Clint nodded once. "All right, Riley," he answered. And just like that, she stepped into a life built on choice. The first real test didn't come with a gun, it came with work. Before the sun cleared the ridge, the yard was already alive with sound. Horses shifting in their stalls, men calling across the pens, steel ringing from the far shed. Riley woke fast in a clean room, confused by the wooden ceiling and the smell of coffee. No chains on her wrists, only fresh cloth wrapped tight where the iron had rubbed her raw. She flexed her fingers, felt the sting, then swallowed it down like she always had. Outside, Clint moved steady, giving orders without raising his voice. Tom listened because he respected him, and Jesse listened because he wanted to. Riley watched from the porch, a beat too long, then forced herself into the yard. "Morning," Clint said. "Morning," she answered, guarded. "You know how to saddle. I was riding before I could walk." "Good," Clint said. "We're checking the north fence line." Tom's eyes followed her as she stepped into the tack room. She felt his doubt scrape across her back, and it lit something stubborn in her chest. She grabbed a saddle without asking and walked it to a restless chestnut mare. The horse tossed its head and stamped, testing her like it tested everyone. Riley didn't flinch. She laid a hand on its neck, spoke low, and breathed slow. The mare settled, and Tom's brows lifted just a little. Clint didn't praise her, he just watched, and that felt better. The land opened wide as they rode out, winter grass bent under a hard breeze. Fence posts leaned where cattle had pushed wire, sagged where time had won. Clint dismounted and handed Riley a coil of wire and a pair of pliers. "You can handle that," he said. She gave him a look like he'd insulted her bloodline, then went to work anyway. They worked side by side with no chatter, only hammer strikes and wind. Riley pulled the wire tight, harder than she needed to, like pain was proof. Her wrapped wrist burned with every twist. She didn't slow down. She wouldn't give Tom the satisfaction, and she wouldn't give herself an excuse. Then her wrist slipped, and the coil snapped back. She hissed, dropped the wire, and turned away fast. Clint saw the dark stains spreading through the cloth, and he didn't rush her. "Let me see," he said. "I'm fine," she snapped. "You're bleeding." He didn't argue, didn't grab her arm. He opened his saddlebag, pulled out a clean bandage and held it out like an offering. "Wrap it tighter," he said. "That's all. No pity, no sermon, no hand on her shoulder." Riley took the bandage, and for a second her throat tightened. Help that didn't come with a hook in it felt strange. She wrapped her wrist, swallowed the feeling, and went back to the fence. Clint turned his eyes to the horizon like he'd seen nothing at all. Back at the ranch, the afternoon light went thin and gold, and the air had that sharp bite that keeps a man honest. Jesse met them near the corral with a grin that didn't know better yet. "You ride like you were born in the saddle," he said. "I was," Riley answered, flat as a plank. Tom stepped up, arms crossed, and Clint could hear the challenge before the words came. "We've got a stubborn colt in the south corral," Tom said. "Been kicking at everyone near took Jesse's knee yesterday. Think you're up for it." Riley didn't blink. "Show me," she said. The colt was young, strong and scared, eyes wide and rolling like it expected the world to hit first. A rope lay in the dirt, and a short whip hung on the rail tools men used when they didn't know what else to do. Riley walked into the corral without either one. Tom's mouth tightened like he was waiting for her to get taught a lesson. Clint stayed quiet, but he shifted his weight, ready if things went bad. Riley stopped at the center and did nothing. No chasing, no circling fast, no waving arms to push the animal. She let the colt move, let it read her, let it find the edges of her calm. The colt trotted a tight loop, then a wider one, snorting hooves, thudding in nervous bursts. Riley's hands hung loose at her sides, and her voice stayed low, steady, almost like she was talking to herself. Minute by minute, the colt's frantic rhythm softened. Its ears flicked forward instead of pinning back. It stopped cutting hard angles and started making room. Riley took one slow step, then another, never closing too fast, never turning it into a corner. When the colt finally paused, she reached out, palm open, and waited. The yard went quiet enough to hear the wind on the boards. Then the colt leaned in just a touch, like it couldn't help itself. Riley's hand settled on its neck, light as dust, and the animal didn't jump away. Jesse let out a breath he'd been holding. Tom's eyes widened, and the man looked almost offended by the fact. "I'll be damned," he muttered. Riley stepped back out of the corral, brushing dirt from her hands like it was nothing. "You don't beat fear out of something," she said. "You give it space." Clint watched her a long moment because he knew she wasn't only talking about horses. He'd seen men try to break land, cattle women, even their own sons, and call it strength. Riley had done the opposite, and the whole ranch had felt it. Tom didn't look at her the same after that. Neither did Clint. That night the ranch went too quiet for Riley's mind to tolerate. No jailhouse echoes, no distant shouting, no boots pacing outside a cell. Just wind against wood and the slow creak of a porch swing that nobody was sitting on. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and the silence filled itself with old sounds. Iron on bone. A door that wouldn't open. Breath that didn't belong to her. Sleep came in pieces, and then it turned on her. She woke with a sharp gasp, shirt damp with sweat, heart hammering like hooves on rock. For a second, she couldn't remember where she was, only that she had to get out. She stumbled from the room and into the yard, barefoot, cold, biting her toes, air cutting clean through her chest. She gripped the fence rail hard, forced herself to breathe, tried to convince her body it was safe. "You all right?" a voice said from the shadows. Riley flinched so hard it made her angry. Clint stepped into the moonlight, hands visible, staying back. "Didn't mean to startle you," he said. "I'm fine," she snapped, because it was the only armor she knew how to wear. Clint didn't argue with her armor. After a long beat, she spoke again, quieter, like the truth slipped out by accident. "It don't leave." "What doesn't?" Clint asked. "The feeling," she said, "like I'm still there." Clint nodded slow, like he'd met that kind of ghost before. "Maybe not exactly," he said, "but I understand losing peace." Riley's eyes narrowed, half daring him to lie. Clint looked out across the pasture, where the moon laid silver on the grass. "My family died when I was younger," he said. "Fever took them fast. After that, the house stayed full of their voices, even when it was empty." Riley stared at him, caught off guard by how plain he said it. "Time didn't fix it," Clint went on. "Work didn't fix it." "What did?" Riley asked, almost angry at the question. Clint's mouth tightened, then softened. letting it hurt, he said, not fighting it like it was shame. That don't make sense, Riley muttered. It doesn't have to, Clint replied. They stood there, under the moon, two people holding different kinds of loss, both heavy. If I stay, Riley said, finally, I won't always be easy. I don't expect easy, Clint said. I get angry. I've noticed. I don't trust quick. You shouldn't. She watched him like she was testing the edges of a trap. You're not scared of me, she asked. No. Why? Because you don't hurt without reason. The words landed deep because nobody had ever named her that way. Riley exhaled slow and her shoulders dropped a fraction. I ain't running, she said. Clint nodded once. All right, he answered, and the night felt a little less sharp. 2 days of calm passed, then dust rose from the east at sundown. Riley saw it first from the barn loft, and her stomach went cold. 3 riders, tight formation, moving like they'd already decided the ending. Lyle Hargrove rode in front, hat-low smile, sharp as a spur. He didn't ask permission, he just crossed the yard and stopped beside the corral. Well now, he drawled, heard you bought yourself a wild cat, Rollins. Riley's hands curled, because every bad memory wore that same voice. Clint stepped forward, calm as ever, and set himself between them. What do you want, Hargrove? Clint asked, and he kept his hands loose. Hargrove's eyes slid to Riley like she was a tool he'd misplaced. That girl's been stealing off land that borders mine, he said, and I'm owed. You're owed nothing, Clint replied, and the words came out like stone. Hargrove laughed, then let his hand hover near his belt, hoping fear would do the work. I could take her back, he said, finish what I started in Red Valley. Riley's breath hitched, but Clint didn't move an inch. She's not going anywhere, Clint said, and Riley heard the promise behind it. Hargrove stared a long moment, then spat and rode away with a warning. The ranch stayed on edge, and the wind kept pushing from the same direction. Near midnight, the horses began to snort, then stomp, and Riley sprang up. She ran outside barefoot again and saw lantern light flicker wrong by the barn. Smoke curled into the sky, thin at first, then thick, and the south wall glowed. Clint was already moving, rifle in hand, but his voice cracked when he saw her run. Riley yanked the barn door, heat rushed her face, and the air tasted like burning hay. She cut the first tie rope, slapped a flank, and a terrified horse burst into the yard. Clint hauled another free while Tom and Jesse rushed in with buckets cursing through smoke. Then Riley heard the colt, the one she'd gentled, screaming from the back stall. She went for him and Clint lunged after shouting her name like it could pull her back. Inside, sparks fell like angry insects, and a beam groaned overhead. Riley kept her voice low, easy, now easy, and the colt's panic finally slowed. She sliced the rope, turned him, and pushed him toward the door, just as the roof gave way. Clint grabbed her waist, dragged her clear, and they stumbled out, coughing into cold air. The colt bolted past them alive, and the barn roared as the roof collapsed inward. Riley stared at the flames, shaking, and whispered, "This is my fault." "No," Clint said, voice hard. "This is his, and I won't let it stand." Tom found tracks by the east fence, 3 horses and a cut latch hanging loose. Clint looked at Riley through smoke and starlight, and she looked back, not wild now, just done running from him anymore tonight. By first light, the fire was out, and half the barn stood blackened against a grey sky. Ash clung to the boards, and the yard smelled like wet smoke and loss. Clint hadn't slept, neither had Riley, but something in her had settled into place. "He won't stop," she said, voice steady. "No," Clint answered. Pride like his don't quit on its own. Riley looked east, jaw set. "Then let's end it." By mid-morning they rode to Hargrove's place, Clint, Riley, and Tom. Hargrove's ranch sat low, and mean fences sagging, men lounging like trouble was their job. 2 hands stepped forward with fingers near their gun belts, but Clint didn't flinch. "We're here to talk," he said, calm and loud enough to carry. Hargrove came out smiling, then saw Riley beside Clint, and the smile thinned. "You burned his barn," Riley said. "Got no proof," Hargrove shrugged. Clint's eyes stayed level. "We've got tracks, we've got a cut latch, and we've got witnesses who saw your men riding east last night." Hargrove scoffed, but it didn't land. Red Valley already felt sour about that responsibility sale, Clint added. Folks don't like being reminded. For the first time, fear flickered in Hargrove's face, small but real. Riley leaned forward a touch. "You tried to own what ain't yours," she said. "You lost." Hargrove spat into the dirt, then stepped back like he'd met a fence he couldn't push. "Fine," he muttered. "You ain't worth the trouble." The ride home felt lighter, even with the ruined barn waiting. At the gate, Riley slowed and her voice softened. "You still want me here?" Clint looked at her like the question didn't deserve air. "More than ever." Riley nodded once, then said it plain. "I stayed because you gave me choice. I choose to stay." Clint offered his hand slow. Riley took it. No chains. Just choice.